Hi everyone, and here we are on our third panel now, and I'm joined today by a leader in learning and development looking to influence us on and innovate how companies do their learning and development. So Scott, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do and why?
Okay, Nicci, thank you for inviting me on. Firstly,
You're welcome.
my name is Scott Hunter. I run a company called the Innovate Crowd, and it's helping learning and development actually deliver the performance improvements it's designed to do. Because I think there's a research has said that most L&D or training results in about 20% of the people on the training actually do something with it afterwards. So it's like ordering 100 parcels of Amazon and only 20 arriving at your house and the other 80 go somewhere else. So
Wow, that's low figures, isn't it?
It's remarkably low for an industry that's been around for a very, very long time. And I think now there's an opportunity now to sort of look at how we can do things differently to deliver that sort of performance. And partly is helping L&D people learning and development, whether they're external providers or within organizations, just to think differently about what they are, who they are, and what value they add to organizations. So change the perception of learning.
Right. And what sort of tips do you have on how to do that?
The first thing, if you're inside an organization, is understand the value, your own value. So what is it you do? So imagine your job was up for election, and then you had to write a manifesto, and the staff, the management, and that were the electorate. They were the voters. Why would they vote for you?
Yeah,
What are
that's
you
a good
offering?
one.
Yeah. What are you offering to them that adds value to them? They say, yes, I want this person to do this because I can actually see what they do. So I think if we look at that, it helps us understand ourselves.
Yeah, and also you'd have to, with that analogy, you'd have to bring some personality and a bit of enthusiasm as well, wouldn't you, in order to motivate people to actually want to vote for you as well. So
yeah, and what do you stand for? What's your values? So you can then become purpose driven. So you say, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. And then that gives you a starting point, because then you've identified basically your brand, an internal brand. And then from that, you can build from there, because you've got something that's concrete. And then once you understand your own brand, you can start acting consistently in a way that delivers on that brand within the organization, in how you act, what you say, what you do. And then that starts to build trust. And then from that gives you sort of the reputation, which enables you to influence within the business.
It's interesting because, I mean, as a copywriter and strategist, I'm all about finding your brand voice and telling it to the world. But I think people often then forget, once they've actually hired the people that are enthused about the brand, to actually keep that kind of momentum going within the business itself. And I think that's really important to remember there. Yeah, really interesting. And at the moment, I mean, we all know what type of a year we've had. We don't need to go there. The whole world's aware. But with people going back into business now, heard on the radio yesterday, someone back in for the first time since October last year. What tips do you have for those companies that want to be inclusive to people, basically whoever they are, but also wherever they are with their staff? What tips do you have for providing the updated learning and development that they're no doubt putting out now?
I think and partly COVID has enabled us to do this much more. I think there's much more openness to different ways of people consuming content that we provide, whether that's through training or whatever it is. And I think it's about looking at learning. Learning is not just training. Learning is a far wider sphere than just sending people on a training course, whether that's be Zoom or combination or whatever. So for me, the tip is to look at, what do we want people to know or do differently? And how can we give them that information that enables them to do that? And then how can we support them doing it within whatever that might be? So I think it's for us to look at the multiple channels that we can provide information. Can we provide information easily and quickly for people, so there's less barriers for them actually gaining that information? So introduction, like micro learning. So I say, one of that example of the manifesto, that's a learning opportunity. You can just ask people, give them that manifesto and say, right, just have a think about that and then answer these questions. That's learning.
Mm. And in schools, I mean, you know, what you were just saying there just made me think about in schools where they have to, you know, get information across on a number of different senses, like from seeing it, from hearing it, from getting involved in acting out or role playing and that sort of thing. Is that the sort of thing that business should be thinking about as well, to bring a holistic sort of approach to the learning rather than just sitting in front of a screen being talked at?
Absolutely. I mean, who wants to sit in front of a screen and somebody just talk to you? It's not engaging. You're not. What's the motivation to learn? I think that's partly also why are you asking these people to do something different? So if people are coming back to the workplace, we like to know the reasons behind doing something. So say to people, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. So instead of just going, oh, you're going on a training course, or it's one of those mandatory training courses, you've got to do it because you come back and, oh God, you know, and it's just, there is, whoever decided to say something like that and expect people to be enthusiastic and learn is beyond me.
I mean, the one thing that I always remember as a nurse is every year we used to get sent to medical gas training, and it was the most yawn-tastic. I mean, I deliberately go to bed early the night before because I have this thing where I just every year would be like falling asleep in it and being poked by a pencil by my peer going, wake up, you know. And it was just, I mean, it could have been so much more interesting than it was the things that you could do with the gas and things. But yeah, it was incredibly boring. So I can empathise with those people that traditionally kind of feel that learning can be, you know, a bit of a chore. But I mean, if you explain why you have to do it, I think that's a good starting point, isn't it?
Yeah, and also give people the opportunity. And the other thing to consider is, when do people need to know? And so how can we get what we're giving to people as close to the time of need? And think about that as well. So it's not too difficult. So we can learning and development can learn from people like marketing. We can learn from other disciplines. So you might have somebody who's just been promoted in your organization to a manager, and they've never been a manager before. It's their first role. And then you kind of know what challenges a new manager has. But we know that's going to happen with this person. So how can we support this person through that journey rather than waiting 3 months to send him on a bog standards leadership and development program?
And after perhaps he's already feeling overwhelmed and it's too late.
Yep. And what is he or she learning on that program? And then how applicable is that in their work? And then what are you doing as an organization to support that person practicing those skills after they've had what we call the instructional aspect of it? So I do like what COVID has helped us do, is helped us split our perception of learning and say, you know what, learning isn't just an event. Always think of learning as a process. And you've got somebody here and you want them to be here, whatever that is. And then what's the steps that we need to have in place to give the person the capabilities and the capacity to do it, but also the opportunity and the time to continue doing it and practicing. So if we look at that, consider it a journey, and that's the bit that quite often goes wrong, is we send people on a training course expecting that to solve problems, and they come back into the workplace and say only 20% of people will do something. So what are we doing to help those 80%? So so think about behavior. Is we need a reason to do something, we need an opportunity to do something, and we need support to do it. So
and while you were talking, I was kind of thinking about as well, when you're working with other solopreneurs and that sort of thing, that that can be a bit of a journey, can't it? When you first start off working with them, you don't really know exactly how they're going to fit into your organization as another freelancer, and you know, what you can use them to help with and that sort of thing, and also how's best to communicate with them. I've started working, you know, the end of last year with a VA and a designer, and I obviously come from a word point of view, whereas one of them in particular comes from a very visual point of view. So we found communicating through Loom videos has been quite helpful in the pandemic, because that way you can you can see what somebody wants rather than just have it described in words. And I was just wondering if you had any tips for the solopreneurs watching this, thinking, is this relevant to their needs, on how to bring, you know, people step by step into your business that way.
Yeah, again, it's like you say, is that don't have a one size fit all approach. So you have to look at people as individuals and say, okay, what's the best way for us to work together? How does this person, and to be an effective communicator, the skill lies in you having the flexibility to change how you do it, not expect other people to change to you. So, because I did 18 years in the prison service. So, and if you're working on a landing with 35 prisoners and it's like 8:30 at night and it's time for them to go to, for them to finish for the day and then us to sort of count them all up and go home. Although you're having the same conversation, you're having 35 variations of that conversation because they each have a reason that's important to them that you can then use to help influence them to go behind their door, to give up some of that freedom. You can't, I don't think you can have the same conversation 35 times. It's going to be effective for some and ineffective or ineffective for others. So consider yourself, I mean, like an engineer, calibrate your communication to the people you're talking to. So what is it that is important to them? So another thing you can always look for as well, if you want to help influence and motivate people, is listen to the language they use. What words do they repeat often? That tends to give you an indication of what's important to them. How do they respond when you send an email compared to when you have a phone call or a Zoom call with them? How easy is it? And think about, am I getting the responses I'm expecting from this person through this way I'm communicating? And if not, do something different. As you say, and you think about it, if you're trying to explain a design to somebody, it's a very visual thing you're trying to do. It's very difficult to explain a visual thing in words. Words as you're a wordsmith, you play with words. Words have meaning, have ambiguity, and they have, everyone puts their own meaning into words. So if you can do a variation of think about what's this person need to learn or know from me to help me to work together. Is it very descriptive, or is it something that can be done visually, or a combination of two? And then think about platforms you can use like Trello or Mural or one of those, and you can just give them a board, and then you can have a board in which you can have a combination of stuff in there. And how do you guys want to work together? So I think it's always about having that conversation. Ask people what works for you.
And and I think that's a really good tip as well, of having the board there where you can put, I mean, Trello is good, you can put links and things in that. Also a Google document as well, where you can see where the changes were made, and you can drop in your links and then have the words and maybe some images and things like that. I find really helpful. But yeah, I mean, I definitely found it useful what you were just saying about about the different prisoners and how you had to speak to each of them very differently to get them to do exactly the same action. So that was very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
And I think everything we think about is, and this goes to learning, it goes if you're a solopreneur working in an organization, or if you're don't see the organization as an entity. The organization is a group of individuals.
Yeah.
And therefore, how you communicate with the organization will differ depending on who within that business you're talking to.
Absolutely. And you were saying earlier about it being quite similar to marketing, and that's what we always say in marketing, that even in business to business communication, there's still another person on the other end of that conversation. So you should still be talking to a person. So I think that's really valid.
Absolutely. Organizations are a construct. They don't actually exist. They're a group of people working together.
Yeah.
So you don't have a reputation or a relationship with the organization. You have a relationship with people within the business. So, and if that person leaves the business you've got a good relationship with, you have to rebuild that relationship. So the organizations themselves, you don't have good relationships with organizations. You have good relationships with people in a business.
Yeah. And in my marketing, I like to bring stories into things, because I feel like we learn much. Learning is not linear, is it? It's very much more like a spider diagram, where you have the thing that you want to learn, and the first kind of time you hear it, you might not really process it, but then when it's connected with something else that you've watched or you've seen or you've read, and then suddenly it becomes a bit more of something that you're going to remember. And my mind's gone now, but yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts? Yeah, stories, that's it. Do you have any thoughts on how to make your training that you're putting on engaging through trying to get all the different types of stories involved and things?
Yeah, I think asking people to tell their own story is really, really powerful. So imagine, like, normally when you start a training program, or a training event or whatever it is, this thing called the creeping death, and nobody likes it. No, okay, we're going to start here, introduce yourself, tell us, and they try to make it nice by tell me something interesting. But the first person says, please don't pick me. The second person isn't listening to what the first person says because they're panicking about what they're going to do. And everyone's picking out their own stories. So if you just break them into small groups at the beginning and just ask the question, why is it important for you to be here today?
Right.
And then what you're helping people do is actually connect to why they're there and why it's important to them. And you can say, why is it important for you, your organization, and maybe your community as a whole, or your clients that you're important here? Then you start thinking in sort of multiple levels as well. So you're encouraging people to think at a sort of an individual, a group, and then a sort of a whole, sort of a global process. So the questions we ask are really powerful. And I always think that questions work on two axes. One is, what level do you want systems thinking? Do you want them thinking at a global level, a group level, an individual level? Do you want them to think in the past, present, or future?
Mm-hmm.
So you can say to people, tell me why it's important for you to be here today. And if you've got, like I did a training course thing on helping people sort of deliver virtually, and I didn't actually tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I asked them one of the questions, tell me a time when you had an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when people start telling the stories, then you can say, okay, what is it that then let's pick out the themes. What is it that people were doing that made it? How did you feel? What did they do? And then you just help people through storytelling, pick out bits, and then they can use that information. So, okay, what can you now do moving forward with using a previously good experience to build on to move forward? So I didn't really tell them much at all.
That's again like very much like copywriting, because at the beginning you say to them, oh, what is it that you want out of working with a copywriter? And then at the end you can ask them, oh, this is what you wanted from working with a copywriter. Was, how did that go, type thing. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you today, Scott. Where can people find you if they want to go further down this rabbit hole of improving their learning and development?
The website I've got is www.theinnovatecrowd.com, or they can just find me on LinkedIn.
Great. And thank you so much.
Welcome.
And goodbye from me, Nicci Lou, copywriter and strategist, and see you next week. Bye.